Faye Monroe stared at the restaurant's gold-lettered doors like they might swallow her whole. "This is stupid," she muttered, glancing down at her thrifted dress and scuffed heels. Blind dates are for people who have time for this kind of disaster. But she'd promised her coworker, Megan, she'd go. Megan claimed the guy was sweet, successful, and not hideous. Faye wasn't convinced. She hadn't been on a real date in almost 2 years, not since her ex walked out the same week she lost her job. Since then, her life had been all about paying rent, working long shifts at the bookstore, and making sure her sister could stay in school. Faye took a deep breath and stepped inside. The hostess greeted her with a smile that made her want to turn and run. "Good evening. Do you have a reservation?" Yeah, blind date. I think the reservation is under, Michael." The hostess nodded. "Right this way." Every table she passed made her more aware of how underdressed she was. Women in designer dresses, men in sharp suits, the clink of wine glasses. God, what was she doing here? Then she saw him. The man sitting at the corner booth looked like he walked off the cover of GQ. Dark hair, piercing blue eyes, a tailored black suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. He stood when he saw her, and she immediately forgot how to function. "You're Faye?" he asked, his voice low and smooth. She nodded, stunned. "Yeah, sorry, I think I was expecting someone a little more normal," he laughed, and the sound actually made her stomach flip. "I get that a lot." "I'm Oliver Maddox." Her eyes widened. "Wait, you're the date," he nodded, sliding back into the booth. "You were expecting someone else." She sat down slowly, blinking. My friend said your name was Michael." His lips twitched. "That's my middle name. I use it sometimes when I don't want people Googling me." That should have been her first clue. "Why would someone Google you?" He raised an eyebrow. "You haven't?" "No. Well, that's refreshing." He picked up the wine list. "Red or white?" She blinked at him, still processing. "Why would people Google you?" He met her eyes and shrugged, like it wasn't a big deal. "Because I'm the CEO of Maddox & Rowe." The name hit her like a freight train. Maddox & Rowe was on every billboard downtown. Real estate, tech, finance, basically. The guy owned half the city. "You're a billionaire," she whispered, suddenly very aware of her $15 dress. He gave her an amused look. "You say that like it's a disease." I work at a bookstore," she blurted, then cringed. "Sorry, that came out wrong." He leaned in, eyes still locked on hers. "Don't apologize. I like real people, and you're the first person I've sat across from in months who hasn't tried to impress me." She fumbled with her napkin. "I thought this was a joke, or a prank." "You're really here for a blind date?" "I was supposed to have a lunch meeting with a new investor," he said, pouring them both water. "They bailed. My sister dared me to try a blind date for once. I figured what the hell, and then you walked in." She laughed nervously. "And I'm glad I stayed." Faye stared at him. "You're not just being polite." "No," he said simply. "You're sharp. You didn't even blink when I said I was a CEO. That's rare." "Oh, I blinked," she muttered. "I'm still blinking." He laughed again, and she couldn't help but smile. His laugh was real, not rehearsed. She hadn't expected that. The waiter came by, took their order, though Faye barely remembered what she asked for. She was too busy trying to figure out if this was real. "So," he said, leaning his arms on the table, "what do you actually want to do?" "Other than escape through the bathroom window," he grinned. "I'd chase you." She raised an eyebrow. "You'd actually chase a girl in a bookstore dress in a heartbeat." That shut her up for a second. She shook her head. "I don't know what I want, honestly. I used to write, but life kind of got in the way." "You still can," he said like it was simple. "It's not that easy." "It is if someone believes in you." The way he said it made her throat tighten. When was the last time someone said something like that to her and meant it? "You don't even know me," she said quietly. "I'd like to," he said, just as quiet. They ate, they drank, they laughed. And for the first time in a long time, Faye forgot about her bills, her broken car, and the way her life felt like it was constantly sinking. When dinner ended, he stood and helped her into her coat like a gentleman from a movie. "I'll get you a car," he said. She shook her head. "I can take the bus." He looked at her like she'd just offered to swim home. No, you're not waiting at a bus stop in heels, I insist. She didn't argue, mostly because she was too tired to fight and partly because she didn't want to leave just yet. Outside, his driver pulled up in a sleek black car. He opened the door for her, then paused. I know this was supposed to be a one-time thing, he said, but I'd really like to see you again. She hesitated. Everything about this felt too fast, too unreal. But then she really looked at him, and something in her chest cracked open. Okay, she said. His smile was slow, genuine. Tomorrow, she nodded. Tomorrow. He watched her the whole time the car pulled away. And Faye, sitting in the back of a billionaire's car with the city lights blurring past, realized she wasn't blinking anymore. She was smiling. The next evening, Faye stood outside a narrow glass storefront tucked between a florist and a tailor on the Upper East Side, clutching her coat tighter as the wind picked up. She checked the address again, twice, then once more. This couldn't be right. Before she could double back, Oliver pushed open the door from inside and stepped into the crisp air. He wasn't in a suit tonight. Dark jeans, a slate gray sweater, coat unbuttoned just enough to look effortless. His hair was a little messier, and his eyes lit up the second he saw her. You came. You sent a car, she said, still uncertain. I figured I'd at least see where it was taking me. I thought we'd do something different, he said, gesturing her inside. The space was warm and softly lit, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and exposed brick walls. At the center, a long wooden table was set with 2 place settings and a pair of flickering candles. Jazz hummed in the background, low and smooth. What is this? She asked, stepping in slowly. He closed the door behind her. It's a private culinary studio. My friend owns it. I asked if we could use it for the night. She blinked. So this isn't a restaurant, not tonight? He walked to the table and pulled out her chair. I thought maybe we could cook together. She stared at him. You cook. I try, he said with a shrug. But I figured you could help me not burn the place down. They spent the next hour elbow-deep in pasta dough, flour on their sleeves, laughing over his terrible chopping technique. She teased him for holding a knife like a tennis racket. He countered by tossing uncooked mushrooms at her when she wasn't looking. For the first time in ages, she wasn't thinking about money or deadlines. She was just existing, and it felt good. Okay, be honest, she said, sliding a tray into the oven. Is this your idea of a date, or are you just trying to impress me with how not corporate you can be? He leaned against the counter, watching her. A little of both. That's honest. I figured you'd appreciate that. She wiped her hands on a towel. What made you do it? Build a company like that? His smile faded slightly, not disappearing but shifting. I grew up watching my father work himself into the ground. He was a mechanic. Always under a car, always covered in grease. Never complained, but I saw what it cost him. She leaned her hip against the counter, listening. I wanted something different, he continued. Not just for me, but for my mom, for him. By the time I was 22, he was gone. Heart attack. He never saw me make it. Faye's voice softened. I'm sorry. He gave a small nod. Thanks. I used to think success would fix everything, but it just made the silence louder. She didn't speak for a moment. Then gently, is that why you're always surrounded by people but look like you're somewhere else? He glanced at her, surprised. You notice that? You're hard to miss. He laughed under his breath. You're different, you know that, people keep telling me. No, he said, stepping closer. I mean it. You walk into a room like you're not trying to take anything from it. That's rare. She met his eyes. Maybe because I've never had much to take. They stood there, the space between them humming with a quiet tension. The oven timer broke the silence. Over dinner, they talked about things they hadn't planned to share. He told her about the night he signed his first deal and celebrated alone in a hotel room. She told him about the story she started writing in college and never finished because life got messy. You should finish it, he said, pouring her another glass of wine. I don't even know if I remember how. You do, he said, no hesitation. I can see it in your eyes when you talk about it. She looked at him, stunned by how casually he made her believe in herself. After the plates were cleared and dessert was forgotten, they stood by the window watching the city lights. His hand brushed hers, slow and deliberate. "I don't usually do this," he said quietly, "invite strangers into private kitchens." "No, let someone in," she swallowed. "Me neither," he turned to face her fully. "I don't know where this is going, Faye, but I know I don't want it to stop." Her heart kicked hard in her chest. "That makes two of us." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Their kiss was soft at first, tentative, like they were still learning the edges of each other. But then it deepened and the air shifted. She felt it in her bones when she finally pulled back, breathless. She rested her forehead against his. "I should go," she whispered. "Stay a little longer," he said, his voice rougher now. "No pressure, just be here." She hesitated, then nodded. They sat on the floor near the window, legs tangled, a blanket draped over both of them. The city moved on beyond the glass, but inside that room, time slowed. When he finally walked her to the car, he didn't kiss her again. He just held her hand for a moment longer than necessary and said, "Call me when you get in." "I will." As the car pulled away, Faye stared out at the night, her fingers still tingling from where he'd held her. Her cheeks were warm, her heart louder than she liked to admit. This was dangerous. She could feel it. Because the way Oliver Maddox looked at her wasn't casual. It wasn't passing, it was the kind of look that changed everything. Faye pulled open the bookstore's back door, the scent of old paper and fresh coffee flooding her senses. The morning rush hadn't started yet, but she still felt the pressure in her chest like a ticking clock. She crossed the stockroom and clocked in, trying to ignore the way her phone buzzed in her pocket for the 5th time that morning. "Someone's popular," Megan said, appearing behind the counter with 2 cappuccinos and a knowing look. Faye took the coffee, grateful for the distraction. "It's nothing." Megan arched an eyebrow. "Nothing wouldn't be texting you at 7 in the morning." Faye hesitated, then sighed. "It's Oliver." Megan choked on her drink. "Wait, as in blind date Oliver. The one with the jawline and the eyes that make people forget how to spell." "I don't recall mentioning his jawline. You didn't have to." Faye rolled her eyes, but the blush gave her away. "We've been seeing each other, quietly." "How quietly?" "Like whispering through a pillow quietly or sneak through the fire exit quietly." "He sends a car to pick me up after work sometimes," Faye said, lowering her voice. "We've been spending time at his place, cooking, talking." Megan leaned forward. "Have you seen his apartment?" Faye nodded once. "Tell me everything. Is it penthouse or palace?" "It's both. There's a view of the river and a piano he doesn't know how to play but insists on keeping because it feels right in the room." Megan whistled. "Okay, but seriously, what's going on with you two?" Faye hesitated. That question had been circling her mind all week because something was happening, something real. But every time she tried to give it shape, it slipped through her fingers like steam. "He listens," she said finally. "Like really listens. He remembers things I mention offhand. Like last night he brought up a book I said I loved in middle school, and then he just pulled it off the shelf in his library. He has a library. Of course he has a library." Megan lowered her voice. "Do you like him?" Faye didn't answer right away. She didn't need to. The way her eyes softened said enough. "You look terrified," Megan said, more gently now. "I am," Faye admitted. "Because it doesn't feel like a fling, and I wasn't looking for anything like this, not with someone like him." "Why not him?" "Because he's not just out of my league. He's out of my reality." Before Megan could respond, the bell over the front door jingled and customers began filtering in. Faye moved behind the counter, but her thoughts were far from the register. Later that afternoon, while restocking the fiction section, she heard her name. She turned, and there he was. Oliver stood near the entrance, hands in his coat pockets, eyes scanning until they found her. He looked out of place, surrounded by discount paperbacks and plastic bookmarks, but he didn't seem to care. He walked toward her like he had every right to be there. "You're not supposed to be here," she whispered when he reached her. "I missed you," she blinked. "It's only been 16 hours. 17 technically, but who's counting?" She tried not to smile. "You're going to get me fired. I'll buy the store." She stared at him. "I'm kidding," he added quickly. "Mostly." She lowered her voice. "Why are you really here?" I need a favor. Her brows lifted. There's a fundraiser tonight, he said. It's for a nonprofit that funds literacy programs in underfunded school districts. I'm donating a collection of first editions, and I need someone who actually knows books to help present it. She narrowed her eyes. You want me to go to a black tie event and talk about books, he nodded. And also be the most intelligent woman in the room. She hesitated. I don't have anything to wear. I already took care of that. Before she could argue, he held out a small envelope. Inside was a handwritten note on thick paper with a single address. Nothing else. What is this? You're fitting, he said. They're expecting you in an hour. She blinked. You bought me a dress. I had one reserved. If you don't like it, we'll find something else. She looked at him, completely thrown. I can't let you walk into a room full of billionaires in anything less than something that makes them stare, he said, softer now. Because I know you'll make them listen, she swallowed. You really think I can do this? He leaned closer. I've never been more sure of anything. That night, the ballroom was a blur of champagne and velvet, gold accents and crystal chandeliers. Faye stepped out of the car in a navy gown that wrapped around her like it had been made just for her. Because it had, she wasn't used to the way people looked at her now. But Oliver stayed close, his hand brushing hers every few moments, grounding her. When it was time to present the donation, he stepped aside and let her speak. She walked to the podium with shaky breath. But as soon as she began describing the power of literature, the way it saved her during the hardest years of her life, the crowd fell silent. When she stepped down, there were tears in more than a few eyes. Oliver met her with a look that made her knees weaker than the heels she wore in the car afterward. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. Then he reached over, gently sliding her hand into his. I think I'm falling for you, he said, voice low. She turned to him, heart stammering. But I'm scared, he added. She nodded once. Me too. He looked over, eyes steady. Can we be scared together? She leaned her head against his shoulder, and for the first time in years, the future didn't feel impossible. It felt like the beginning. Faye stood in front of the mirror in Oliver's penthouse, barefoot, hair still damp from the shower, staring at her reflection like it might have answers she didn't. The navy gown was gone, the ballroom a memory. Tonight marked 2 weeks since the fundraiser, and in that time her life had shifted in ways she hadn't planned for. Behind her, the soft shuffle of footsteps echoed across the marble floors. You want breakfast? Oliver's voice was still husky from sleep. She turned slowly. He wore a white t-shirt, sleeves pushed up, his hair slightly tousled, holding 2 mugs of coffee. He held one out to her and she took it, fingers brushing his. I've never been this happy and this terrified at the same time, she said, voice low. He exhaled through his nose, stepping closer. Why terrified? Because it feels like I'm living someone else's life. Like any second now, I'm going to wake up and find out it was all just something I dreamed up during a slow shift behind the counter. Oliver set his coffee down and slid his hand gently around the back of her neck, resting his forehead against hers. You're not dreaming, and this is your life now. If you want it. She closed her eyes for a moment. You say that like it's simple. It is, if we stop overthinking it. They were quiet for a beat, then she opened her eyes. What if I can't keep up with your world? Then I'll slow mine down, he said. Or better yet, I'll build a new one with you in it. Later that day, Oliver brought her to a property under renovation in Tribeca, a wide, sun-drenched loft, still bones and beams, raw and open. He handed her a key. I bought this with the intention of flipping it, he said. But now. I don't want to sell it. She turned slowly in the space, taking in the high ceilings, the untouched windows, the glint of possibility everywhere. You want to live here? She asked. I want us to live here. If it's too soon, just say so. But I haven't felt this certain about anything in a long time. Faye looked around. It wasn't the grandeur that struck her, it was the potential, the blank canvas, the way he was offering her roots, not just roses. I want to design the library, she said quietly. His smile was immediate. Then it's yours. Over the next week, they met with designers, picked out reclaimed wood, debated over light fixtures. It wasn't about extravagance, it was about building, together. He surprised her by deferring to her on nearly every detail. When she asked why, he said, "Because I trust your eye. And because I want to come home to a place that feels like you." But not everything moved smoothly. She received a call from her sister's school tuition was overdue. Faye hadn't mentioned the full extent of her financial situation to Oliver, not because she didn't trust him, but because pride was a hard thing to unlearn. That night, she sat on the edge of his bed, twisting the hem of her shirt in her hands. "I have to cover my sister's last semester," she said. "They won't let her register for classes if I don't." Oliver set down the book he was reading. "How much?" She shook her head. "That's not why I'm telling you, Faye. I don't want to be someone who falls into your life and lets you fix everything." He stood and walked toward her, kneeling in front of her so they were eye level. "You're not. You've changed everything for me. You've made me look up from the contracts and the numbers and actually see people again. You've reminded me what real feels like." She swallowed hard. "I'm not offering to write a check," he said. "I'm offering to be your partner, and when one of us is struggling, the other steps in." "That's how it works." She nodded slowly, and when she finally let him help, it wasn't about money, it was about trust. The final test came unexpectedly. A tabloid photo surfaced Oliver and Faye leaving the fundraiser. The caption was cruel: "Bookstore girl bags billionaire." It went viral within hours. Her phone rang nonstop. Customers whispered behind their hands at the store. Strangers commented under her photos with gold digger emojis and assumptions about her character. When she walked into the penthouse that evening, she found him pacing. "I'm sorry," he said the moment he saw her. "I should have protected you better. You didn't do this. They're vultures." "I don't care about them," she said. "I care about what we do next." He stopped pacing. "You're not scared." "I'm furious," she said. "But I'm not running." He crossed the room in 3 long strides and kissed her like a man who realized he could lose everything in an instant. A week later, Oliver invited her to his company's annual gala black tie, televised, a sea of cameras. She hesitated. But when she walked into the ballroom on his arm in a deep burgundy dress, head high, she wasn't just the girl who once hid in the back of a bookstore. She was the woman he chose to stand beside him. When he took the stage to give his speech, he went off script. "I've built companies, signed contracts worth hundreds of millions, but none of it compares to the moment I met someone who reminded me that there's more to life than numbers." The room stilled. She didn't care about my last name or my net worth. She cared about who I was when no one else was watching. Faye stood frozen, heart pounding. "I never thought a blind date would change my life," he continued, "but it did. And I want to spend the rest of it with the woman who made me see again." He stepped down, walked straight to her, and pulled a small box from his pocket. A sharp breath caught in her throat. "I know it's fast," he said. "But I don't want to wait another day to start forever with you." He opened the box. Inside was a ring unlike anything she'd ever seen, simple, elegant, timeless. Faye's eyes welled as her voice caught. "Yes." The room erupted into applause, but in that moment there was only him and her and the future unfolding between them. They didn't rush the wedding. They didn't need to. They spent months building their home, finishing the library together. Her sister graduated. Faye started a foundation to fund literacy programs, inspired by the very event that changed her life. And every morning when she woke up next to Oliver, she didn't feel like an imposter anymore. She felt like she finally belonged because she'd earned this love, and because he had two lives. One blind date, and a forever neither of them ever saw coming. Rain drummed softly against the windows of the Tribeca loft as Faye stepped barefoot onto the cool wooden floors, her fingertips trailing along the edge of the shelves they'd just finished installing in the library. A stack of unopened boxes waited in the corner: novels, memoirs, poetry collections, all carefully selected from her favorite sellers around the city. The scent of aged paper mingled with fresh paint. Behind her, Oliver came in from the hallway, tie loosened, jacket off, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He carried 2 mugs of tea and handed her one without a word. "I think this is my favorite room," she said, curling her fingers around the warm ceramic. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Mine too." She leaned her head back against the shelf and looked up at him. "Do you ever miss the old version of your life?" "No," he said plainly, "because none of it ever really felt like mine, not until now." They stood there for another moment, the quiet between them comfortable, full. Later that afternoon, Faye sat cross-legged on the new rug, sorting books by genre while Oliver worked across the room, reviewing blueprints for a new community center initiative he'd launched with her foundation. The plan was ambitious: a multi-use space for underserved neighborhoods with free tutoring, literacy programs, and creative writing workshops. Her idea, his funding, their future. She glanced up. "You know, I used to believe people like you only existed in books." He didn't look up. "Charming, brilliant, and devastatingly handsome." She tossed a folded newspaper at him. "No, people who could change the world and still be decent." He dropped the paper, finally meeting her eyes. "I'm not decent. I'm just lucky enough to love someone who makes me want to be." That evening, they hosted their first gathering in the new space, a small dinner for the board members of her foundation. Faye wore a wrap dress the color of stormy skies and kept nervously adjusting the sleeves. Oliver caught her hand just before the guests arrived. "You've done more in 6 months than most people do in a decade," he said. "They're lucky to be in your orbit." "I don't want to disappoint anyone." "You won't," he said. "But even if you did, I'd still be right here." The dinner went better than she could have imagined. People listened when she spoke, not because Oliver stood beside her, but because she had something worth saying. When the guests left, she stood alone on the balcony, the skyline glittering like a promise. He joined her a moment later, slipping his arm around her waist. "I've been thinking," he said, "about us." She turned her face toward his shoulder. "What about us?" "I want more." Her breath caught. "More?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. She froze. "I know I already proposed," he said. "But I realized something the other night. That ring was a symbol of everything I had. This one is a symbol of everything we've built." She opened the box slowly. Inside was a ring unlike the first, simpler. A single sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds set in white gold. "It's made from the first set of cufflinks my dad gave me," Oliver said quietly. "I had them melted down. He never got to see where I ended up. But I think he'd be proud if he knew I gave them to you." Faye's eyes filled. "You did all this for me?" "No," he said. "I did it because of you." She threw her arms around him, burying her face in his neck. "Yes. Of course, yes." They married 6 weeks later in a garden filled with wildflowers, surrounded by a small circle of people who mattered. Her sister walked her down the aisle. Megan gave a toast that made everyone cry. Oliver didn't take his eyes off Faye the entire night. They didn't honeymoon in a typical sense. Instead, they spent a month traveling by train through the countryside, stopping in quiet towns, reading in bed, and cooking together in small kitchens. He bought her notebooks in every city. She filled them with ideas. 1 year later, the foundation opened its flagship center. Faye stood beside Oliver as they cut the ribbon, children cheering behind them. After the ceremony, she pulled him aside, out of view of the cameras. "You know," she said, brushing a piece of lint off his lapel, "you never told me what you were thinking that night we first met." He looked down at her, eyes warm. "I was wondering how I ever got so lucky to sit across from a woman who didn't give a damn who I was." She laughed. "I was wondering how I ended up on a date with someone who looked like a Bond villain." "Charming. It worked out," she said, lacing her fingers through his. "I love you," he whispered. "I love you more." "No," he said, tugging her gently toward him. "I love you beyond reason, beyond logic. Beyond anything I ever thought possible." She leaned into him, forehead against his. "I still wake up and can't believe this is real," she whispered. He kissed her softly. "It's real," he said, "and it's just the beginning." They stayed like that for a long moment. And when they stepped back into the light, hand in hand, they weren't just a billionaire and a bookstore girl. They were partners, builders, lovers, home.